I'm VJ Hamilton and welcome to the Autoimmune Reset, the place for you to learn how to thrive with autoimmune disease and feel empowered to take steps to transform your health to feel better than ever. You can start making changes today to improve your health. So with every episode, my mission is to share with you simple ways to up-level your diet and lifestyle with key learnings from my own journey reversing autoimmune disease and inspirational stories from those who have reset their autoimmune symptoms and are now thriving in life. I suffered from autoimmune disease for over 25 years and now I live symptom-free, and I wish the same for you as well. So thank you for being here and sharing this time with me. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Autoimmune Reset Podcast. I'm your host VJ Hamilton. I'm a nutritionist, scientist and expert in autoimmune disease. And today we have the wonderful Jenn Trepeck on the podcast. Jenn is a health and lifestyle coach. She's the host of the award-winning podcast, A Salad with a Side of Fries, which I was honoured to be a guest on, and is the author of Uncomplicating Wellness, which was out last year, and you definitely have to go and read it because we're going to actually be talking about that subject today because it gets so complicated with everything in the health space. So welcome, Jenn. Excited for you to be here.
Oh, VJ, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to continue our conversations.
Yeah, exactly. And we can dive in a little bit more into what you're brilliant at. Just so people who are listening to this podcast might not come across your podcast before, might not know you, could you give us a little bit about your background and why you do what you do?
Absolutely. So my background, funny enough, is like business and marketing, which plays into all of this stuff when it comes to, the current state of the wellness industry. I put wellness in air quotes, But I came to all of this work through my own saga. I call it a saga because I feel like the word journey doesn't do it justice, There was drama involved, right? But for me, it was mostly about my weight. And I was a dancer growing up, and it wasn't a thing until it was, like for so many of us. And, I did every diet under the sun, gained and lost, up and down, lived on that roller coaster and thought, well, this just is what it is. That was what we saw around us of anybody dealing with those things. And I remember at times feeling like I would breathe and gain weight, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And when I started to learn really what is fundamentally human, like I call it the nutrition education we're all supposed to know and no one ever taught us, it completely changed my life. Like it was the only thing that allowed me to say I kicked my food issues.
Yeah.
And then from there, it was like my body let go of all of this stuff that it was holding on to. And at the same time, I was like, everybody deserves this information. And why isn't this what we learned? And so I set out on a mission to pay it forward and help people help themselves with this information. Because fundamentally behind everything I do is the mission to change the state of healthcare. And I believe that really comes down to each and every one of us understanding that true healthcare is what we do every single day, and that it's up to us to create that.
Yeah, that's why I love what you do and the messages that you provide on your podcast and on your other content, because the truth is it is a really confusing space out there. And even when people are going out there with the best intentions, trying to make the best choices, they might read something and it says natural on it, or it says it says something on it that makes it sound like it's healthy, and you can be doing all that hard work and nothing paying off, and it can just be very frustrating, very disheartening. And I know lots of people in my life, lots of clients who have struggled with this in the past, and they've ended up eating like tiny amounts and still having issues with their weight and inflammation. So what would you say to, when you're looking back at your own story, when you stopped dancing and when weight became an issue, what were you think was the right approach at that point in time?
I had no idea. Right. I mean, on one level, we all heard eat less, move more.
Yeah.
And then within the eating less, it was every diet out there, like at the time, it was Atkins. Now we know it more as like keto, right? But tried the South Beach diet, Weight Watchers, the cabbage soup diet, the 40-30-30 balance diet, which was all about what we now call macros. I mean, it was like every diet under the sun. When I was growing up, my dad was always following some diet. And so I remember I would come home from school, even elementary school, middle school, and it would be some Jenny Craig snacks in the pantry. And I would go into my dad's office where he was working from home and I was like, can I eat this? And he's like, I guess, And so it's like, I mean, I tried everything because things would work, in air quotes, work for a finite period of time.
Yeah.
But it never felt like I was making true progress, or there would be that, I'm quote unquote good for a while. And then it's like, do you remember the old cartoon of Garfield the cat where just, right? Like open his mouth and like eat everything or that, it was like this feast and famine approach. And every time it was a different version of whatever the latest thing was that I thought was going to be the answer.
Yeah. Okay. So what did you discover that changed everything? Was there some studying you did or a book you read? Where was that light bulb moment for you?
Yeah, so I worked with a coach, and the curriculum that I base my practice on is the curriculum that changed everything for me. And it's really about understanding how food impacts our body, what our body does with food, and that ultimately, whether we are burning fat or storing fat is a function of blood sugar. And if we can then choose foods to keep our blood sugar balanced and eat regularly enough to keep our blood sugar balanced, then we're never putting our body in this fat storage space. And over time, when the body knows that it's always going to get food, that it is cared for and nourished, it will release the fat stores it's been holding on to, because fat is fuel stored to be used later, right? Ultimately, and when I say blood sugar balance, like you could have a constant glucose monitor, but you don't need one. I did this for almost 20 years without one. I've played with them at times, but it's not about your blood sugar never changing, because that wouldn't actually be healthful biologically either. We want our blood sugar to respond to our nutrition, to our activity, to, right, all of those things. But we want it to follow, sort of go up and down within sort of this middle band, right? And that means we're avoiding extreme highs of blood sugar and extreme lows. So the way we do that, my little mantra that I teach all my clients and my podcast listeners is protein and fiber at every meal makes removing fat no big deal. Yeah. Protein and fiber at every meal makes removing fat no big deal. So protein is clean, lean protein. I always say, eat what you like, don't eat what you don't like, right? Yeah. Fiber, and this is where it gets very confusing for people, but fiber is vegetables and sometimes fruit. And a meal is really any time we eat. The only difference between a meal and a snack is how much we have at a time, and then therefore how long it's going to last us until we need to fuel again. And then the other thing we need a couple times a day is some quality fat. And one day I'll figure out how to get the quality fat into the cute sentence. But for now, you'll add that in too.
It's quite a simple, straightforward approach, but I think so many people struggle with this. I find when clients come to me, they are eating a pretty good diet. To be honest, by the time they come to me, I seem to get people when they've tried lots of different things and then they come to me for some reason at the last hurdle. So they're eating a reasonable diet. But what I find is that actually getting protein into their meals is a challenge. And I get the question all the time, how do I get enough protein at breakfast? And
well, the other thing to that point too is that what most people think of as a serving of protein is far too small.
I agree. Yeah, completely.
Right? So when I work with clients, our objective, a meal for a biologically female body is 4 to 6 ounces of protein. That's your whole hand of protein. A male body is 6 to 8 ounces. So still whole hand, the hand is bigger, right? And then a snack is 2 to 3 ounces. So that's the palm or a little bit less. And if you grew up when I did, you were told a serving of protein was 3 ounces.
Yes, yeah.
No, ma'am, right? So when people start to hear that, like I'm curious if you see this. I see it. People come to me, they're having 2 eggs for breakfast.
It's generally 2 eggs, or that's in a good scenario, to be honest.
Right. So an egg is 1 ounce of protein. So if we start to put that in perspective, your 2 eggs, right, is 2 ounces of protein. We would expect that to last us, depending on what you pair it with, no more than maybe 2 hours. So of course you're hungry again mid-morning. That's actually the body functioning well versus what we think it is, which is like this moral failure that we're hungry. Like, it's like because we think we're supposed to eat less. And then we go, well, how do I get all this protein and keep eating less?
Yes. Yeah. And that's why actually with the 2 boiled eggs is like a perfect snack to have. And they do them a lot now. I see them in like the different convenience shops, which is good. Like, so you can just go and grab that as a protein snack instead. But how do you find people manage that in terms of making sure they get enough breakfast? Because I suppose a lot of us are busy in the morning, people with kids, it's normally quite frantic for people in the morning. I always recommend maybe having a bit of calmness if you can factor that in. But it is a busy time, isn't it, in the morning? So I don't think people struggle as much with protein in an evening. It seems to be more the morning and lunchtime.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we typically focus on with breakfast is, right, the eggs are easy. They cook quickly. The other thing is you could pre-make like an egg bake that is eggs and vegetables already made, and then you just have to heat it up.
Yes.
Cold. Right, that too.
Cold, yeah.
Same, right? Like, I'll get it in, whatever. It's funny because a lot of people say, well, that's when I do a smoothie. And I have mixed feelings about smoothies and some of those. So on the one hand, yes, it can be easy. On the other hand, I find consistently across the board, people have better energy and more sustained energy, even from the same amount of protein, if they chew their food.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
So a smoothie, first of all, we want to make sure that it's lots of protein, lots of vegetables, a little bit of fruit, right, for your flavoring. And on occasion, to mix it up, rather than making that your go-to every single day. There's also a piece of like the body and registering that we're eating when we chew versus when we just swallow something. So especially if you're starting the day with a smoothie and then feel like nighttime, you're ravenous, or you have dinner and then late at night, you're like, I feel like food again. A lot of times nighttime eating is directly connected to how we're starting our day. So take a look at that and play and experiment and see what you notice. So I like an egg bake, like I said, to make that easy. I think I'm a big fan of if somebody wants a chia pudding or those kinds of things, I use a protein shake as the milk.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea.
So it sort of just bulks it up entirely from the jump in a way without it sort of being anything extra.
Yes.
So we can make some little tweaks to the things that we love. And the other thing too is like if you're doing eggs, right? And we're saying a serving size for a meal is 4 to 6 ounces. That's 4+ eggs. So think about not all of our protein has to come from one source. So maybe we're having 3 eggs or 4 eggs, and maybe it's, a chicken sausage or some Greek yogurt if dairy works for you. Or, right, like we can build a plate and build a meal. It doesn't have to be everything coming from one thing.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's sometimes the challenge, isn't it? Like people are just like, how do I put everything together? But you're right. If you get some, like an egg bake, you have some, even if you have some sausages that are already cooked, like chicken sausages already cooked, you can add those in. I like to put a bit of feta cheese, but again, obviously you need to be conscious around dairy, the Greek yogurt, and to keep it, I like to mix it up as well, like not having the same thing every day. And I agree with like the chia seed pudding, just adding in a bit of protein powder can be helpful, or collagen.
Yes.
Up the protein. So yeah, these are some really good ideas. Then you talked about fiber as well, didn't you? Which I think is another challenge people have, because people just think of fiber and they think of fruit. I think we just associate those two things. And I'll have clients that come to me and they're eating like 8 pieces of fruit a day. I'm like, no, that's a lot of sugar. So how do we get the fiber in without overloading on the sugar?
Yeah, it's so interesting to me that in your world, they're coming with fruit as their fiber. In my world, people are coming with grains as their fiber.
Okay.
And fiber powders. Yeah, okay. And this is where, too, it's funny because protein for the last couple of years has been so in the zeitgeist. And now I would say in the last 6-9 months, everybody's starting to talk about fiber. And it's like, we've been screaming this for 20 years, but whatever, So what ends up happening is we conflate this idea of carbs and grains, and vegetables are your carbohydrates. And so when we start to look at adding more in, I give people the guideline of we're on a mission to get 8 to 12 servings of vegetables a day. Now,
which can sound very scary to some people.
Right. So a serving, by the way, I don't live my life with measuring cups in my handbag. A serving is a handful. If we're talking about leafy greens, we're going to say 2 handfuls is a serving. So if you could do eggs with 2 handfuls of spinach and some bell peppers and some onions and maybe some mushrooms, we're probably hovering around maybe 2 or 3 servings of vegetables at breakfast with our eggs. And by the way, that's going to leave you so satisfied and last you all the way through till lunch. So we're looking for, if our objective is 8 to 12 throughout the day, then we're saying, okay, a couple at each meal is going to get us somewhere 6 to 8, maybe 9 at just meals. And then if we need a snack in there, right? Maybe the snack is an apple with some nut butter. Maybe the snack is veggie sticks and hummus, right? So we can start to sprinkle them in. So just thinking about every single time we eat, where's my fiber coming from? Am I getting a proper serving of that so that over the course of the day, we're getting there? And for a lot of people, start with one meal. Then focus on the next one. I think sometimes too, if we end up, speaking of complicated, right? If we start with 8,500 rules and expect ourselves to follow all of them, it really just sets us up.
It really does, doesn't it? And I think that's what I've learned with working with some clients. I mean, some clients come to me and they've already weaved in a lot of these things.
Yes.
And other clients, they're starting from scratch in terms of this, and you just need to take it a step at a time. And things are going to be a bit slower, but just take it every 2 weeks. And just think about, how can I start weaving something in? And you don't even need to think about fiber. Just as you said, just think about the colours on your plate and
Exactly.
think about it in, do it that way. I mean, if you leave all your vegetables till dinner and you have to eat 10 vegetables, then it's going to be difficult. For me, I'm always if I'm hungry or if I'm craving a snack, which to be honest, most of the time if I'm craving a snack now, it's a comfort thing. I'm not really hungry because I've probably eaten enough in the 3 meals. And I'll say, I'm having my apple and walnuts first. If I'm hungry after that, I'll have something else. And most of the time, I'm not hungry after that. So it's always good. I'm prioritising the either vegetables or fruit, or have some celery or something.
Exactly.
And then decide, do I actually need anything else? And after that, I rarely do. And that's the way I do it. And that's the same with breakfast. To be honest, another breakfast I quite like is some eggs with a smoothie. So you're kind of getting the vegetables in the smoothie, but you're having the eggs as well. And you're chewing. So it's almost like you're chewing your smoothie in a way.
And I explain it to people too with the fiber, right? Part of our body's job with fiber and how it functions is that it is our digestive system's job to break that down. Because that takes time, that's what slows the release of that fuel into our system and keeps our energy stable and our blood sugar stable. So when we're thinking about our food choices, whether it's the protein shake with some fiber or, the vegetables that we're chewing versus the vegetables in our smoothie, I remind everybody, the more work the machine does, the less work our body does.
Yes. Yeah.
So again, when we think about even choosing our protein powder, right? Recognizing, especially as fiber becomes part of the zeitgeist, if we're choosing a fiber powder, well, what kind of fiber is that? A lot of fiber powders are not healthful choices. And so the more we can choose food, because the fiber naturally exists in the vegetables and the fruit, we don't have to do anything extra to get it or make our body do, it will do what it's supposed to do when we give it those things. And so part of what it's supposed to do is break that down, pull out that fiber, give it what it's looking for. So again, I'm with you on the variety piece and the mixing and matching and pulling the things together so that variety supports the body too. How many colors can you put on your plate? By the way, if all of your fiber is coming from grains, probably not very many colors.
Yeah, exactly. And you can come, it's a double whammy if you're having some vegetable, then you get all the polyphenols and everything as well.
Exactly.
Well, we need to speak about everything that's complicated in the wellness space, because that's really what your book is about as well, isn't it? So when you were starting out and when you're working with clients now, what do you feel like is the biggest frustration at the moment in terms of the messaging that we're getting in this wellness space currently?
Yeah. It's such a good question. So when I first started in this space almost 20 years ago, the questions were really, well, what do I eat? Plan am I supposed to follow? And part of what inspired the book is that the questions more recently have become, well, creatine or cold plunge? And you're like, wait a minute, right? So the questions that people are asking have gotten way more in the weeds.
Yes. That
we are being marketed all of these biohacks and supplements and solutions. And what's missing is, I think, two things. One is the foundation, because you will never supplement your way out of lack of nutrition. You will never supplement your way out of not sleeping. So we're missing the foundation. And then two, when it comes to the supplementation, when it comes to the biohacks, we're missing the nuance that makes the difference between whether something is effective or a waste. And ultimately what happens is that we try those things. They don't, quote unquote, work like we think they're going to. And we internalize that. We think we're the problem versus the quality of the supplement, versus the prioritizing the biohack over the fundamentals. So it's really about kind of putting the foundations, I call it the bio stack instead of biohack, putting the bio stack in place, and then we can add some supplements. Then we can add the biohacks and notice that marginal improvement. But it's little things like, I do a lot with supplementation in my practice. And so many times people will come to me and say, oh, I tried that, it didn't work. And it's like, well, was it the clinically researched ingredients? Were they at the clinically evidenced doses? What else did it have the cofactors to be able to work? Like right now, glutathione and NAD everywhere on the internet, at least on my side of the internet and what I'm seeing.
It is here too, yes.
And again, even with NAD, like I have an NAD Plus product that I've been working with for a few years, and there's nuance to it. There's dosage. There's complementary ingredients that need to be there. And depending on where you live, the precursors that you're allowed to use in a supplement, it's just, there's so much to it. And so I caution everyone to work to see what's out there, take that information in, and then work with somebody who is spending their time doing that research, who can guide you toward the quality product. Because, and I say this not to add to the fear mongering, because that is not my intention and that is the opposite of how I operate. But a friend of a friend passed away last year because of liver and kidney damage, and they tracked it back to poor quality supplementation.
Wow, I have not come across many of those cases, but God, that's so horrible.
And it's rare. And again, like, I don't know his whole story. It is. And I don't know his whole story. I don't know what they were, how many, how long, right? Like, full disclosure, I don't know that whole story.
Yeah.
But it does go to show that quality matters. Noticing a difference in taking something, quality matters. And so that I do think is really missing in the zeitgeist of supplementation and protein bars and all of the things that are out there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think some of these products as well are compounds which are part of like a longer biochemical chain that happens in the body. Right. And you take one thing, going to become imbalanced as a result of doing that. Yeah, I agree. I think when it comes to these more complex supplements in particular, you need to know what your current status is and whether it's going to be right for you. But it'd be interesting. I just want to go back to what you were talking about with your bio stack, because I think this is so important as well. Not only do we need to make sure the supplements are appropriate for us and we've ruled out any contraindications and things like that, which obviously no one is really talking about on the internet. But as well as that, I completely agree. If your foundations aren't in place, then you can take all the supplements you like, but you might see some results, but you're not going to see those long-lasting results that we're all seeking for. So what's in your bio stack then?
Yes. Okay, awesome. So we talked about one piece, which is food is fuel.
Yeah.
Movement, building muscle, hydration, which is about more than just water, sleep, stress management, community and connection.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
And then, of course, mindset is sort of built into all of that too. But those are really the big pieces of that bio stack to make sure we have in place.
Okay. And is what you're covering in the book as well?
Yes. So each one, and I will say the book is not a how-to, right? Like it's not an eat this, don't eat that kind of thing. Of course, in every chapter, I'm giving you ideas to play with and experiment with and see what might work for you. But it's outlining that bio stack, what that means. And then you start with the one where you go, ooh, right? The one that you've been conveniently probably ignoring. Experiment. Play with one thing and start to look at what you notice when we start to get all of these pieces in place. And when we were talking about it before, even with clients and how, when they come to you and then trying to do everything at once and all that stuff, it's been a really long time since any of us haven't known how to do something.
Yeah. And
especially with this, because there's this assumption that we know how to take care of these human bodies that like we end up in this thing, well, I'm supposed to know this. Well, how? No one's ever taught us this. And what we were taught was sort of convoluted and messed up in its own way, right? So I like to explain to everybody, like, think of it a little bit like a college course. We're not going to pass the final on day one. We're going to learn and implement over time. So you could pick up the book, read a chapter, and put it down. And you don't have to read it in order. It's not, start with what's resonating with you and then kind of go from there and see what you notice to get those foundations in place.
And what do you find with your clients? Is there a particular area that you feel like a lot of your clients are coming to you, or people that have read the book and fed back to you? Which area do people find the most challenging?
Well, that's a good question. I think with my clients, ironically, what people find the most challenging is the lack of rules.
Yes, I get that sometimes as well.
They'll say, well, what am I supposed to eat? I'm like, well, what do you like? And they're like, what do you mean? So it's funny. I think it can be so challenging to transition to actually eating what you enjoy, finding enjoyment in food, because for so long we were taught that that's the problem, and over time, paying attention to our bodies. The other thing I see being a tremendous challenge, both with readers and clients, is how we measure success. Because so many people, especially in my space of weight management and metabolic health and cardiovascular health, everyone is used to measuring by the scale. And that's actually the worst metric for our health, for our progress. So that shift is also a big one for people to make. The aha that I keep hearing coming back from people is one piece that it's so approachable. Somebody actually said to me this weekend that she's giving the book as like a hostess gift whenever she goes to someone's house. She's like giving it because it's not passive aggressive and like, you might need this. It's very approachable, and it is a mindset shift. It is really rethinking how we approach everything related to health and coming at it from our own personal definition of health and wellness, and even thinking about what that is, because we hear this word all the time and we sort of assume that we're all talking about the same thing, but are we? I'm not so sure sometimes.
I completely agree. I think this is why I was always, keen to be on your podcast and to have you on mine, because we're coming from it from exactly the same perspective. I think with my own health, it was learning about me, learning about what I like to do, what do I like to eat, and understanding what foods I react to, but actually not in a meaningful way, not just thinking actually I've woken up with a bit of a sinus issue or headache today and making note of that, rather than thinking about restricting whole food groups.
Exactly.
And I know we spoke a lot about that on your podcast as well. But I think the same for exercise and movement, and just find something you like. Don't do something which you hate. It's not about no pain, no gain. That is just not the world I want to be part of anymore. And even with biohacking, I've done keto, I've done AIP, I've done all these different things in the past. I did see some improvements by doing some of those things. So I'm not completely against them, but I've just realized now that actually this simplifying your life, simplifying your approach, uncomplicating everything, as you say, just makes such a huge difference. And you know, if anybody's listening to this, I know I speak a lot about testing and certain supplements and other things that are quite complicated, but this needs to be the foundation 100%. So thank you for sharing all this today. Is there anything that we haven't mentioned that you would like my audience to know about what you do?
That's a great question. In terms of my work with my clients, you know, I work with people for 12 weeks. Okay. The objective is 12 weeks for you to build the tool belt so that you can go live your life. My objective is for you to not need me.
Yes.
And, you know, and then, you know, you're just like, hey, I'm not really sure what supplements. Like, that's also available. It doesn't have to be, you know, 12 weeks of coaching if what we're looking for is just some, you know, cleaning out that supplement pantry, figuring out really what are, you know, the best next steps, you know, potentially after working with you, VJ, and remedying that autoimmune, that gut lining, and then looking at what's next, right? Like, we sort of have these phased approaches. And so thinking about it that way and saying, okay, where am I and what is the next phase for me? And reach out to the people who can be supportive, because you don't have to figure it out on your own.
And it is so much better when you have somebody that you're working alongside. When I've ever needed support, I've always reached out to certain, you know, coaches and people in different disciplines, and it's made a huge difference, because
absolutely
it's hard when you're trying to do it alone. I do realize there's a cost involved with that, but it does make a big difference. And I think 3 months is a really lovely time to see huge changes when it comes to your health as well.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, you too. So where can everybody find you if they are keen to work with you and find your book as well?
Sure. So the book, Uncomplicating Wellness, is available wherever books are sold. Across the world, Amazon is probably the easiest. And then my website is asaladwithasideofries.com. On the contact page, you can book a 15-minute call with me. You can also send a message. All social media, I am at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. And then, of course, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Salad with a Side of Fries there. And I love hearing from you. So please send a message. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Jenn. Loved having you on the podcast today. I'm sure everybody that has listened to this will have found it really helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for listening today. If you would like to find out more about what Jenn does, I'm going to be putting all her links in the show notes as well. You can contact me on my Instagram page as well, which is at the Autoimmunity Nutritionist. And you can pop over and join us at the Autoimmune Forum if you need that community support as well. All the links will be in the show notes. If not, have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Thank you very much for joining me today on the Autoimmune Reset. I really hope you enjoyed the discussion, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And if you liked it, I would hugely appreciate a review on iTunes, as it helps me understand what you like about the podcast and to help share the information with more people. I'm excited to speak to you next time, and remember, you have the power to take the reins on your health. So keep the faith and celebrate the small wins. Until next time.